I remember the way the storm smelled that night like wet sagebrush and iron, sharp enough to cut through whiskey fumes and cigar smoke. The Golden Spur Saloon shook with thunder rolling down from the Black Mountains, and every nail in its warped floorboards seemed to tremble in warning. I'd meant only to buy a sack of flour and ride home before the heavens opened, but the desert has a cruel sense of humor, and so I found myself hemmed in by Weatherand Mendot. My name is Clara Monroe, widow of a miner who once believed veins of silver could outshine the loneliness of this land. I was 36 years old and tired of being stared at as if I were a wager yet to be one. When Thomas died beneath a cave-in, he left me a ranch sprawling over 2,000 acres of stubborn grass and stubborn gossip. Perched on the edge of Dry Creek, New Mexico, I thought grief was the hardest thing I'd ever carry. I was wrong. That night in the spur, Brad Hollister rose from his corner like a bear roused from winter hunger. His bulk seemed to blot out the lantern light, his 6 hired men fanning around me as though they'd rehearsed the moment. Brad had been circling me for years, circling my land more than my heart. And I knew what the storm outside meant. No lawman would ride through that rain. No preacher would risk his horse. I was alone. The piano player stilled mid-note. Cards sagged in rough hands. A woman in a scarlet dress, Dolly, who worked the upstairs rooms, slipped back into the shadows with wide eyes. The whole saloon seemed to hold its breath. Brad's breath smelled of rye and arrogance when he leaned close. Clara, storms have a way of forcing decisions. Maybe tonight you'll learn what it means to stop fighting your own future. I laid my palm on the polished wood of the bar, fingers brushing the hidden pearl-handled derringer beneath my skirts. My heart was galloping, but my voice came out steady as I met his eyes. My future isn't for sale, Brad, and it sure as hell isn't for you. His men laughed low, mean chuckles that made my skin crawl. Brad reached for my wrist, confident I'd flinch. Instead, I set the little pistol on the table between us, twin barrels glinting in lamplight. The sound of the hammer cocking was louder than the thunder outside. The room froze. My chest was tight, but rage steadied me more than fear. Take one more step, Hollister, and you'll learn how small a hole it takes to end a greedy man. That was when I saw him. A stranger, leaning back in the farthest booth, hat brim shadowing his face. He'd been sitting so still, I'd nearly missed him. Now his head tilted, eyes catching the lantern glow, cold. The kind of blue that made me think of winter seas and battles fought long before. Dry Creek ever heard his name. He didn't move to help me, not yet. But he didn't look away either. Something in his stillness steadied me. Like knowing one person in the room wasn't hoping to see me fall. Brad snarled, fists clenching. But he read the fire in my eyes and decided for once that pride wasn't worth a bullet. He shoved back from the table, spit on the floor, and growled, "This ain't over. You can't hide behind that toy forever." He stormed out into the rain, his men trailing like shadows. The saloon exhaled, voices rising in a nervous hum. I holstered the derringer, hands trembling only after it was safe. When I glanced back toward the stranger's booth, he was gone. I should have ridden home then, storm or not. But fate's a sly card player. By morning, the stranger would ride into my life with the kind of quiet persistence. Unsettles everything you think you've settled. His name, I'd learn, was Jack Callahan. At dawn, the storm had wrung the desert dry, leaving mud slick and skies scrubbed clean. I was feeding the chickens when a rider appeared at the edge of my yard, leading a bay gelding with the tired look of a horse that had known too many miles. The man in the saddle was tall, lean, shoulders squared in the way of someone who'd drilled under command. He touched the brim of his hat when he saw me, polite as a prayer. "Mrs. Monroe," he said, voice carrying that odd, lilting edge I couldn't place until later. Not New Mexico, not even Texas. Something ocean-born. Name's Jack Callahan. I'm looking for work. I wiped my hands on my apron, narrowed my eyes. You were at the spur last night. His mouth twitched, not quite a smile. I saw enough to know a woman shouldn't have to face a pack of wolves alone. I wanted to snap that I didn't need Savin, that I'd kept this place alive through drought and debt and the leers of men like Hollister. But something in the way he sat his horse straight, respectful, not crowding, me softened my words. What makes you think I'd hire a drifter? Don't know that you would, he admitted. But I can ride rope, mend fence, broke horses with the cavalry, fought Apaches in canyons where the sun never touched. I don't drink more than I can handle, and I don't lie. That's what I've got. I studied him, the scar that cut across his jaw, the calluses on his hands, the weary honesty in his eyes. Dry Creek men came at me with flattery or threats. This one offered nothing but truth. $30 a month, I said finally. Bed in the bunkhouse. Try anything improper, and you'll answer to my derringer. His smile was slow, genuine. Wouldn't dream of it, ma'am. But as he swung down, my treacherous eyes caught the way Denham hugged his thighs, the way he moved with the easy grace of a man who'd fought hard to stay alive. I turned away before he saw the heat flush my cheeks. Life on the ranch doesn't pause for pride. There's always a fence broken, a calf lost, a roof leaking. Jack worked from sunrise till dusk, sweat carving clean lines through dust on his back. He spoke little, but when he did, his voice carried weight, like a man who'd learned to measure words the way he measured bullets at night. When the desert cooled and coyotes yipped from the hills, he'd sit on the bunkhouse porch, cleaning his Colt with careful, reverent hands. I found myself carrying coffee out more nights than I cared to admit. We'd talk in fits and starts about his Kentucky childhood, about my husband's dreams of silver, about things we'd lost that never came back. I told him once, when the stars were spilling silver across the black sky, that my marriage had been more arrangement than romance. Thomas was good to me, I said softly, but I never got to choose him. I chose survival. Jack's eyes lifted from the gun parts laid across his lap. Practical's important, he said, but it ain't everything. Something shifted in me then, something I didn't dare name. Trouble found us quicker than love could bloom. The first night, it came as fire. I woke to the scent of smoke, the barn glowing hell-red against the dark. Jack was already running, shouting for me to stay back. He drove the horses out, coughing, shirt singed. When the roof caved, he dove through the flames for the last mare, rolling in dirt with the animal's reins clutched tight. I dragged water till my arms shook, but by dawn the barn was ash. We lost half the feed, some tack, but not a single horse. Jack's eyebrows were singed, his knuckles raw. He only shrugged when I tried to thank him. Wasn't about me. Was about not letting Hollister take what ain't his, because we both knew who had struck the match. The days blurred, suspicion thick as smoke. Hollister's men lingered on ridges, watching. Whispers in town painted me reckless, hiring a stranger, inviting scandal. Women I'd once prayed beside crossed the street to avoid me. My name, already fragile, was being ground into dust, and still, in the quiet, Jack's presence steadied me. One evening, a storm rolled sudden and fierce, rain hammering the earth. We found ourselves trapped in the stable. Close enough I could see the scar feathering his collarbone. Lightning painted his face in stark white, and I swore I could hear my own pulse in the silence between thunderclaps. "You're too close," I whispered. His lips curved. "Aye, feels that way to me too." The horse stamped, breaking the moment. But my heart had already crossed a line I'd never meant to approach. The danger didn't stop at fire. One morning the herd scattered, driven by riders who knew our land too well. Jack chased them, rifle tight in his grip, and didn't come back till dusk, shoulder bleeding. Eyes darker than I'd ever seen. I stitched him by lamplight, hands trembling as his blood-soaked cloth. "You'll be the death of me," I muttered. His voice was low, ragged. Better me than Hollister. Something broke in me then, sharp as glass. I pressed my forehead to his, whispering, "Don't you dare." He didn't kiss me, not then. But the promise was there, humming between us like the storm that had first bound us together. By the time Hollister's lies reached every ear in Dry Creek calling me a whore, a fool, a woman too weak to stand without a man, I'd stopped caring what the town thought, because I'd already chosen not survival this time, not practicality. I'd chosen the stranger with ocean eyes, the man who carried his grief like a saddle too heavy, but still found room to carry mine, and I knew. Deep down, the fight for our land and our hearts was only beginning. The night it ended began like any other, quiet enough to make me believe in peace again. The cattle had bedded down, coyotes called faint and distant from the ridges, and a breeze carried the scent of mesquite through the porch boards where Jack and I sat, shoulders nearly touching, a lantern glowing low between us. For weeks we had lived in the long shadow of Brad Hollister's threats. But shadows stretch and stretch until they either vanish at sunrise or fall into endless night. I should have known which way ours would go. The first sign was silence, too perfect, too heavy. The second was the creak of saddles, faint but certain, drifting through the dark like wolves circling a campfire. Jack's head lifted, eyes narrowing. His hand resting on the worn butt of his Colt, I felt the Derringer's weight beneath my skirt, its presence more comfort than weapon. But my heartbeat hammered fast as hooves. They came from every side, lanterns swinging, rifles gleaming, 10 riders, maybe more, fanning across my yard, as if they already owned it. Brad Hollister sat tall in the center, his wide frame outlined against torchlight, face twisted with triumph. "Clara," he bellowed, voice cutting through the night like an axe. "Thought you could hide behind a drifter and a toy pistol? Tonight we settle this." My knees wanted to buckle, but pride stiffened my spine. I stepped down from the porch, skirts brushing dust, and met his stare. "You're trespassing, Brad, and you'll regret it." His laugh was ugly, full of drink and cruelty. "The only regret you'll know is not talking my hand when I offered it. Now I'll take your land, your pride, and whatever scraps of you are left when this night is done." The men around him shifted, rifles raised. Jack moved like lightning, pulling me back behind the porch rail, Colt already firing. The yard exploded with gunfire, torches casting crazed shadows as bullets tore wood and glass. I fired my Derringer, the crack sharp and desperate. Watching one of Brad's men fall from his saddle with a cry, the world narrowed to smoke and sound screams of horses. Sparks from rifles, the sickening thud of bullets and flesh. Jack fought like the soldier he once was, calm and precise, each shot finding its mark. I fought with everything my husband had taught me before death claimed him. My hands trembling, but my aim true enough to remind Brad that a widow could still be dangerous. Blood stained the porch boards. There's some hours. My ears rang with the storm of it, but my eyes never left Jack. He was everywhere at once, shouting for me to stay low. Reloading with a swiftness born of battlefields I would never see. Then I saw him stagger, a spray of crimson across his shirt. My soul nearly tore itself in two. Brad came forward, revolver drawn, sneer curling his lips. "This ends with you, Callahan. The lady's mine." Jack pushed himself upright, swaying but unbroken, and stepped into the yard. His eyes met mine for a heartbeat, an unspoken vow, an apology, a prayer. Then he faced Brad. The night seemed to pause. Even the torches guttered, as though the desert itself wanted to see this end. Two men stood 10 paces apart, the kind of moment ballads are written about, though ballads never capture the smell of blood or the taste of fear on your tongue. My breath caught as their hands hovered over their guns. It was Jack's Colt that spoke first. Faster than a rattlesnake strike, truer than any oath. Brad's revolver fired a heartbeat later, his bullet carving air where Jack had just been. Brad staggered, shock written across his face before he crumpled into the dust, his empire of greed ending in silence. The surviving men fled, scattering into the night, leaving torches to gutter and die. The yard reeked of smoke and iron. My legs carried me to Jack before I knew I was moving. He was on one knee, blood darkening his sleeve, his face pale but eyes still burning with that stubborn fire. I fell beside him, hands pressing uselessly against the wound, tears blurring my vision. "Don't you dare leave me. Don't you dare." His lips curved, faint but steady. "Do you carry my grief in your saddle?" he whispered, voice raw, "or my kiss in your heart?" The words split me wide open, the truth of them carving deeper than any bullet. I cupped his face, tears spilling freely. "Your kiss, always, always." He smiled then, and though his body faltered, his spirit held. And in that moment, something in me shifted forever. Survival was no longer enough. Love had found me in the ashes, and I would not let it go. The days that followed were a blur of whispers and stares. The town of Dry Creek, so quick to judge, was forced into silence by what they'd seen. A widow who'd stood her ground, a stranger who'd fought beside her, and a tyrant brought down not by wealth, but by will. Still, silence does not equal acceptance. The eyes of women at church burned with suspicion. The mouths of men curled with crude suggestions. My reputation was ruined to some, reborn to others, but for the first time, I didn't care. Jack healed slow, every movement a reminder of the night we nearly lost everything. I tended him through fever and pain, watching his strength return inch by inch. In the quiet hours, when the lantern burned low and the desert winds rattled the shutters, I found myself confessing things I'd never dared say aloud. How loneliness had eaten at me like a disease. How I'd woken some nights praying for anyone who might understand the weight of grief. Jack listened. Always. Sometimes he would take my hand, rough thumb stroking across my palm, and tell me of battles fought in lands far from here, of brothers buried beneath desert stone. Our wounds met in the middle, his grief and mine weaving into something stronger than either of us alone. When he was well enough to walk again, he looked out across the land the ranch Thomas had left me. The soil watered with sweat and now blood. "Clara," he said, voice quiet but certain, "this place has taken enough from you. The folks here will never forgive you for choosing your own way. Maybe it's time we found someplace new, someplace the past can't touch." Fear rose sharp in my chest. Leaving meant abandoning the ground where my husband lay, the home I'd fought tooth and nail to hold. But when I looked at Jack, saw not pity, but a fierce determination to build something better with me. Felt the first stirrings of freedom. "California," I whispered. The word tasted like sunlight, like oceans I'd only ever dreamed of. His smile then was all the promise I needed. We sold what we could, packed the rest. Dry Creek watched us go with mutters and narrowed eyes, but no one dared challenge us. Brad's death still echoed too loud, his blood still staining the dust. I didn't look back. The journey west was hard, each mile a test of will. We rode through canyons where silence pressed heavy, through valleys where rivers sang of renewal. Nights we slept beneath stars so bright they seemed to burn the sky open. And in those nights, Jack would sometimes draw me close, his arms wrapping around me as if to shield me from more than the chill. We crossed into California 6 months after Brad fell, weary but alive. Santa Rosa spread before us, green hills tumbling toward the glittering Pacific, a world away from the dry cruelty of New Mexico. Land was cheap for those willing to tame it, and with Thomas's savings and Jack's soldiers' grit, we claimed 2,000 acres where grass met sea breeze. We called it the Circle C Ranch. Life didn't soften, not here. Storms came fierce, markets faltered, neighbors eyed us with the same suspicion any newcomers faced. But when I walked the pastures, salt wind tangling my hair, and saw Jack riding the ridge with his hat tipped low, I knew we'd chosen right. At night, we sat on the porch, waves crashing faint below, lanterns swinging in the ocean wind. Jack's hand found mine, not as savior, not as possession, but as partner. And in that steady warmth, I learned the truth of healing. It isn't forgetting. It isn't pretending the past never carved its scars. It is carrying the grief together, like a saddle worn but dependable, while making room for something new, something fierce and tender and alive. One evening, as the sun bled into the sea, I leaned against him, the smell of leather and smoke and salt wrapping around me. "I think I've finally found it," I murmured. "Found what?" "The meaning of freedom and love." He kissed my hair, and for once, the world felt wide enough for both. The desert had taken so much from me, my husband, my name, my safety, but it had given me Jack Callahan. And together we found that even in a world that measured women by whispers and men by violence, there was still space to carve something honest, something ours, not survival, not reputation, but life. And in the quiet of that ranch above the Pacific, I understood at last that some risks are worth everything, because in the end, love is not the absence of grief. It is the decision to carry it together, saddle and heart alike, until the road leads you home.